Hello, in this video an attempt will be made to explain the consultation paper on IDEA that has recently been put out in as plain English as possible. Just a bit of a background, this consultation paper has been released on 1st of June and the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare is seeking feedback by 30th June, and this document has a lot of technical terms. One could say it has been sort of made by technocrats, for technocrats, of technocrats. So even though this has been put out, even if there's an English speaking farmer, it's not really easy to understand what this document is saying. So this video is an attempt to explain this document in as plain English as possible. So to begin with, this IDEAS is an acronym, a short form for the India Digital Ecosystem of Agriculture, and I will just be going through this page by page. I may not explain everything line by line, but just give you a broad idea of what I have understood that they are trying to communicate. Feel free to keep pausing this video and reading the text in between if you like, if you think I'm going a bit too fast. So let's begin. The first chapter is sort of sets out the context, and it talks about the challenges in the agriculture sector. Just one thing I would like to bring to your notice here is this bit that they say here right in the beginning, in the first paragraph, that agriculture cannot be seen in isolation. It should be seen as an integral part of a larger ecosystem spanning the entire primary sector, including horticulture, animal husbandry, fisheries, dairy, poultry, and other allied activities, which is very good. This is what all of us would like. However, as we'll see later in one of the annexures, the first memorandum that sets up this task force that has worked on this document actually then goes on to say that the entire database will be built on land revenue records. So one would imagine that only those farmers who have land, agricultural land, only those people who have agricultural land in their name will be defined as farmers in the system. So as a result, if there's any landless, in the sense who don't have agricultural land, who are doing animal husbandry, fisheries, dairy, poultry, etc., or other allied activities like collecting uncultivated forest produce, as of now they are going to be excluded from the system. At least this is my understanding. And then the rest of this, I think this is fairly understandable, and people could also just maybe pause the video and read through, or you could even read through separately. So then next they talk about a recent report that the World Bank Group has put out, underpinning the need for the agriculture sector to embrace digital technologies. Now they've spoken about 7 strategies here, and that's in this image. The first is to strengthen access to foundational data and promote data sharing. One of course does need to share one's data if to get access to services, but at the same time, like it even says in the next point, one would also like to ensure that there is always consent that can be revoked if the data is being used in ways that the person to whom the data belongs to doesn't want it to be used in that way. The second point talks about safeguard of farmers' data and privacy. The third is on reviewing regulations that constrain precision agriculture. So this is something that the World Bank seems to want to promote, precision agriculture. Then enabling competition in digital markets. Yes, so ideally, even I don't think anyone would like monopolies. So any monopolistic practices, if a system is promoting monopolies, it's not good. And then there is support for development of digital payment systems. So this paper and this whole system being put into place primarily looks at digitization in the agriculture sector, but digital payment systems in India have already been put in place, and so this is basically a part of the agri stack, and there are many other stacks that are being conceived as a part of the overall digital governance framework. So in the field of health, there is a health stack. There's similarly stacks being built for education, and the whole payment systems is also a separate stack which is already fairly developed, and most of us already use these systems for our online payments. So this is something that's already there to a fair extent in India. Then they talk about supporting digital entrepreneurship through the ecosystem and investing in R&D. The next point here, this need for ecosystem thinking, is something that we will see permeates right through the whole document. And basically, so it says that a digital ecosystem is a distributed, adaptive and open socio-technical system with properties of self-organization, scalability and sustainability. So just to try and explain what they mean by this, if a system is distributed, then it would mean that it's for example, it would be in the central government, it would also be in state governments, and so there would be it would be housed in many different places, so to speak. So one ideally wouldn't want everything centralized in one place. So distributed is not exactly decentralized, but it's a sort of decentralization. Adaptive means it's not set in stone, and it keeps changing as per requirements, as and when requirements change. And an open socio-technical system, open, one would imagine, would mean that information in this is openly accessible, and hopefully it would also mean that the various programs and software being run are also open for audit, and so that anybody can also look at what these softwares and programs are doing, and if they are doing what they are stated, what is stated that their objectives are. Self-organization means it will allow people to organize themselves within this framework. So just to give an example, Google Maps and allows, to an extent one could say, it allows self-organization of ride-sharing apps like Uber, etc. So that would be maybe a crude example of how the kind of self-organization they're looking at. So it would also mean if there are mechanization services for a hire, then that kind of organization of those kind of services will be possible. Scalability means that once a particular program or software is developed for something at a particular level, then it can easily get scaled up to other levels. So if there's something like an Uber or Ola in one city, then it can easily be deployed even in other cities. So that's what scalability means. And sustainability, one would imagine that they mean financial sustainability here, which means that there isn't going to be perpetual funding, or it may not be that the whole thing is always and completely funded by the government. And Ideally, when one looks at financial sustainability, they would mean that one needs to have markets and revenue models and services will be charged for, so that financially things are sustainable. At least this is the way I am looking at it as of now. Um, so then they talk about the whole development of this concept and what has happened so far. And as you can see, the compositions of the task force and working groups are given in the annexures, which we will get to towards the end. And then again, now we see they talk about an ecosystem approach. Now, this is another thing that I would also like to draw your attention to a little bit. It says here that it was felt appropriate to draw from the national architecture principles and patterns designed by the Ministry of Electronics and IT, especially the India Digital Ecosystem Architecture, which is abbreviated as India. Accordingly, this initiative is named IDEA. So IDEA here stands for India, where this India itself is an acronym once again. The India Digital Ecosystem of Agriculture. So what one needs to take away from this is that basically there is an underlying layer, which is this India Digital Ecosystem Architecture, which is sort of the foundational basis of all these other stacks that are being built, the health stack and the other stacks in education, etc. And similarly, this whole agriculture stack is going to get built on top of this, and so that is why this is being called the India Digital Ecosystem of Architecture. What this may also mean, one doesn't know, one will have to try and find out more. Also might mean is that a lot of fundamental changes to the system may not be possible by just suggesting changes to AgriStack, because many of the features of AgriStack may be inherited from this broader India Digital Ecosystem of Architecture, the India. So how much fundamental change is possible and is in the scope of this whole exercise is something that's probably a bit suspect, and something that will have to be explored and understood more. Then this is something people can read and understand. Now the kind of opportunities that they're talking about, so just to explain these terms being used here, AI and ML stand for artificial intelligence and machine learning, which means there is something called big data. Big data is very, very large quantities of data. So for example, if PM Kisan has about 10 crore farmers, that would be what qualifies as big data, and then that data is analyzed for trends and patterns, and based on that inferences are drawn. So just to give the Uber or Ola example again, the big data there is all information about traffic, and then there is analysis to see what are the times when there is peak traffic and peak demand for their services, and appropriately then there is surge pricing. So those are the kind of things that artificial intelligence and machine learning makes possible. IoT stands for Internet of Things, which basically means that there are devices all over the place which are connected to the internet, and they're sort of talking to each other. A lot of this will come in precision agriculture, where they'll have sensors monitoring microclimate in farms and moisture levels, and which will automatically maybe run drip irrigation systems. It may be monitoring growth in plants and then deciding which nutrients need to be given, or tracking pests, and then deciding if any pest control measures need to be put into place. So these are the kind of things that is in mind when people talk about Internet of Things. And DLT stands for Distributed Ledger Technologies, which is is blockchain. So if you have heard of things like cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, etc., those are all built on this technology of this distributed ledger technology. So that's what these terms mean, and the opportunities that are being envisioned through this whole exercise are presented here in this image. So this is basically the vision that they have, to build a national digital architecture ecosystem to elevate Indian agriculture sector to higher levels of efficiency and productivity, and to improve the welfare and income of farmers. So this is interesting. It's good that they say this here, that the idea is to improve the welfare and income of farmers, because as we'll see as we keep going through this entire document, there is almost nothing in the document that I have seen which protects the economic interests of farmers. There's quite a bit of mention about privacy of data and all that, but I mean, privacy is one thing, and those are political rights, but there are also economic rights, and there isn't much talk. In fact, there's almost no talk of that, of how the economic rights and of farmers can be protected through the system is not something I have found in this document. So these are their stated objectives. And so they are saying that through access of right information at the right time, higher income and better profitability can be realized, and they're also saying there can be better planning and execution, enhance efficiencies, and so one can go through all this. And okay, so this is another thing that I would just like to highlight: to adopt the best principles of cooperative federalism while working with the states and union territories for realization of the vision of IDEA. So they talk about cooperative federalism, but as we'll see later, they are also talking about tying the release of central funds in the agriculture sector to implementation of this. So one would imagine that best principles of cooperative federalism means that if any state wants to opt out, it should be able to do so without any adverse consequences, but that is not what is being envisioned. So this I think should be taken with a little bit of with a pinch of salt. So yeah. So the next is they have all this. They have this big image where they are talking about of the various facets of this system that they can see, and then they go into each of these one by one. So I will not really spend much time here, and as and when they come below, I will keep talking about them. So they're looking at three stakeholders: farmers, and then governments, governance, and the market. So we'll come to all this later, because that's what is the whole of the next section. So then they talk about, so here again you can see there is again reference to this whole India, which we were also looking at earlier, that is actually being developed by the Ministry of Electronics and IT. So this paper has been developed by the Ministry of Agriculture, which is building on something that has already been worked on, or is work in progress under the ministry on in MIT. So that's something to keep in mind, and it keeps getting referred to again and again. So the set of India 2.0 principles is proposed to be leveraged for designing the IDEA architecture. So like I said, if these are underlying principles that are already sort of set in stone, and all of this has to be built on that foundation, then how much scope for fundamental change will be there by only looking just at this document is something that one needs to keep in mind. So the first thing, like they've even said earlier, is ecosystems thinking. So ecosystems span across the center and states, public and private, and they're composed of several autonomous, interoperable and federated systems. Then next is something that they call a building block approach. So basically what they're saying here is that there are going to be different programs or softwares which all sort of run independent of each other, so that you can keep replacing each of those programs or softwares, which one could sort of understand as a building block, and the rest of the system won't collapse. So if there is one program that needs some new features, needs some updation, etc., then that program is updated, and just because that one program is changed, it shouldn't affect the rest of the system, and it should continue seamlessly that a particular program has been upgraded or has been changed. So that's basically the idea, that basically this whole system is made of building blocks, which is made of different softwares and programs that all work together but independently, and therefore each of these blocks, that is each of these softwares and programs, can be independently changed and updated without collapsing the entire system. So that's sort of basically what they are alluding to here. Open API based means is the way to access a particular database is publicly openly available. So for example, Google Maps has open API, so anyone who wants to build anything on Google Maps can do so, because the method or the program to access their underlying database is freely available. So therefore then Uber and Ola and all these people have built their applications on top of Google Maps using Google's open API. So basically open API by default by and large means that if access is being provided to something, then that access will be publicly given by default. Of course there will be exceptions where you may not, where some information or access to some things you may not want to give publicly to everyone, so then there may be exceptions. So that's what this is trying to say. So the next thing here again they say is open. Design the digital ecosystems to be built on open source, which is good. Everything, like I said earlier, if it's built on open source, published as open source, and conform to open source standards, like I said earlier, open source basically means that there is transparency. Open source means that the programs and softwares are shared with the public, so that anyone can audit these programs to see if they are actually doing what they say they are doing. So this is a good thing, and again here exceptions I think are something we need to flag a bit and be wary of. Like I said earlier, open source doesn't in any way mean that what is being run underneath is in any way compromising the privacy or security of what is underneath. Ideally one would want everything to be open sourced. And then they talk about national portability, which means basically that things should function everywhere across India. And then they talk about participatory design. So drive participatory design and end user engagement at all stages of this digital initiative. So now they have put this paper out for feedback, which is a good thing. Some of us had even written asking for some consultations to take place, which is all very good. But as we can see, until this point, this work has already been happening for over a year, and we'll again we will see later that in the task force or the various working groups that have been constituted, there is not a single farmer representative. So this whole bit about end user engagement, one would imagine that farmers would be the biggest end users of the system, and so far there has been no farmer engagement at all. So that is just something to keep in mind. But it's good that they're doing this, they put this out now, and hopefully farmer groups will also come forward and start engaging with this process. And then they're saying that they want to promote innovation, and for this they have something called an ecosystem sandbox. What a sandbox means, or what a sandbox refers to, is basically, so for example, using the same PM Kisan example earlier, so when that service was being built, say that API that we were talking about is how a digital payment system will connect with the PM Kisan database to automatically process PM Kisan payments. So assume that that is the system being put into place. So PM Kisan will provide an API to the digital payment, to the software that is going to manage the digital payment. So through this API, all the details of the various farmers who have enrolled for PM Kisan will get this access to this data will be provided to this digital payment software, and then that software will process the payments. Now one would want this whole system obviously to be robust, which means ideally they would want to do some trials earlier and see, play with it a bit and make sure that everything is okay, do some test runs before finally making it live and implementing it in a full-fledged manner. So the sandbox in a way is the trial room, is where all these little testing and tinkering and those sort of things can be done. That's what it means, that they will provide a sandbox, which means certain limited access will be given, where they can where anyone who wants to try something new can just try it in that place where it won't break the larger system. So it will be sort of an isolated space where this new software or program can run independently and just check if it's working as it's intended to, and if it's doing something wrong, making any mistakes, it won't break the larger system. So that's the idea. Now architecture principles, the first thing that they are talking about is federated architecture model. So we will also, this paper talks about examples later of what this federated actually means. But basically, it means that there are going to be many levels in the system, and each level can sort of work independently of each other. As we go through this more, I'm hoping that this is something that will become clearer. So now they are talking about a single source of truth. So what this means, for example, is that anything related to PM Kisan will only come from the PM Kisan database, or even PM Kisan, for example, like we'll see later when they're talking about creating a database out of land revenue records, or just leave that, or any system where there's this database of farmers, whatever its basis is. If there are changes to that system, if for some reason some farmer has now got a government job and is not eligible to PM Kisan, is going to get taken off the rolls of PM Kisan, or some farmer who was not a part of it till now has now applied to receive PM Kisan's payments, and is applied to become a part of the system. So then all these additions, deletions, changes, etc. to the PM Kisan database is all managed in one place, and anyone who wants to refer to this will always keep coming to that same one place, so that one, if any change happens in one place, one doesn't have to keep, there are no copies maintained elsewhere, and those copies are not being referred to anywhere else, which otherwise would mean, if the original has been changed, then we need to go and find every copy, change every copy, and if there is some mistake in changing all those copies, then the various sources of the data will all be slightly different, which could lead to problems. So that is why when they say single source of truth, what they mean is that there is for each and every item, there is only one single database that is maintained, which everything will refer to, and any changes are done there, so that you don't need to then keep bothering about making changes to copies maintained anywhere else. And then systems of records is something that will come again later. We will look at it when it comes there. And unbundled applications. So all this actually then it's also explained later. We'll look at all this as and when it comes. Now when they say that they want the architecture to evolve in an agile and iterative manner, they mean that once this whole system is put into place, it's not like the underlying foundation can't be changed, and they want the system to be such that things can keep getting changed as and when necessary. So again, as we can see, again they talk about this India framework. So this is something one will have to look at and understand of what exactly it means, because that is where all these principles are getting adopted from. And then they are talking about technology independence. What this would mean, for example, to try and understand is, Uber and Ola work on Android, they also work on Apple. They also have systems where if you don't have an Android or an Apple phone, you can even open it on your browser. So you can book, if you are on a computer, you can open the Uber website or the Ola website and book your cab from a computer without an app also. So that is an example of technology independence. It is not wedded to just the Apple operating system or the Google Android operating system, or even just or browser dependent. So in that sense, this could be some way to understand what they mean by technology independence. Now let's look at these business domain principles. The first thing is they're talking about being value driven, so then various service levels are there, and they want these service levels that they want to keep certain service levels as benchmarks, and then they want to be able to track whether those benchmarks are being met, and what has been the impact and outcomes of that. And so again, for this they have something called the Digital Service Standard, which is again has been developed independently. So this is something they are inheriting from somewhere else and not something being developed as a part of this exercise. And then there are integrated services, which so like I said, they want the whole system to be able to sort of talk to each other, and so there will also be public services on this, private services, there will be central government applications like PM Kisan, there may be state government running their schemes, so they would envision that even those state government schemes are all being integrated and run through this. So in that sense, they want everything to be integrated, and they are talking about being outcome driven, which I think would be fairly straightforward to understand. And then they're saying provide choice by design to the farmer. We also hope that this whole digital system is also optional, and there is a choice even to work outside this digital system. For example, as I make this video, there is vaccination for COVID going on, and all vaccination registration has to happen through this CoWIN app, which is causing quite a bit of problem. Now, in places where this app is not working, or in most people are having issues, but there is no equivalent of an offline. So there is no choice to bypass the system. Like, for example, if you want to book train tickets, you could go to IRCTC and book your tickets online, which is good. And we also want similarly for farmer services also to be available easily online for farmers. But you also have the option of always going to the window and booking. So in case for any reason you don't have access to the internet, these interfaces are in a language a person doesn't understand, or for any reason the person doesn't want to book through the website, there is always the option of going up to a ticketing counter and booking the ticket offline. So we also hope that similarly whatever is being done through this digital system is well and good, and it will hopefully make life easier for everyone. But for any reason, if there are some people who would prefer to do things physically and not digitally, we hope that sort of choice also will be provided for. And so that also, one would imagine would mean universal access, would also mean not just digital services but even non-digital is access also through non-digital means is also available. So because when they talk about residing in remote areas, disadvantaged groups, access to internet is still an issue. There are many places where there isn't regular internet access, easy internet access. Not everyone has a smartphone. So we do hope that these are things that are not just said on paper but actually kept in mind, and the design is accordingly done. Now cloud first means any data that is stored in a server online on the internet is then stored on the cloud, which means it can be accessed anywhere there is internet. You can access the cloud. The cloud is something that is on the internet. So this would mean that data is not saved on individual devices. So if a person is using a certain smartphone for something, their data need not necessarily be saved on the smartphone. The smartphone will be the interface through which the person accesses all these systems, but the actual data that the person is accessing is all stored online. That's what this would mean. Mobile first means that all the design of the interfaces and everything is done for mobile and not for laptops and computers. Then they're saying that data is an asset. So this is something that has been gaining a lot of traction globally. So till the end of the last century, towards the end of the last century, when it was mostly the manufacturing sector that was dominating, and this whole service and especially digital online industry was just in its infancy. So then the manufacturing industry primarily runs on energy, which at least back then and even to a large extent now depends on various kinds of petroleum, coal, etc. And the largest companies back then by capitalization used to be petroleum companies. So I think Exxon, if I remember right, which is a petroleum company, was the biggest company in the world. And now we see that about 20 years later, that the biggest companies in the world are all tech companies working with data. And so the new mantra is that data is the new oil. So oil companies were the ones that used to make money earlier. Even closer home, Reliance is primarily an used to be, or is to a fair extent still is, primarily an oil company, and Reliance also now, going by this mantra, everyone sees that renewable sources are the future and oil doesn't have a future. So what is the next source of money for all these people is data. So that's why this term has been coined, that data is the new oil. And so even Reliance, for example, is now looking to get into the data business, which is why you now have Geo and various other things being built on top of Geo, because they want to get into this data business. So that is why, that is the thinking behind saying data is an asset, and that is why they want to make data exchange easy, because anyone who wants to make money from data will need to have access to data. So that is why one needs to have data exchanges. So that is the thinking behind all this. And now they talk about data sharing and laying clear specific policies that will govern data sharing, and specifically they talk about data protection regulations. Now, it says, in conformance with applicable data protection regulations, which all sounds very good, but the fact is that as on date, this data protection law has not been passed. There is a draft currently lying in Parliament. I think it was sent to a parliamentary committee, and just yesterday, day before, there was some news that this parliamentary committee has finalized its reports, and members of that committee are not aware of the work that has been done. So anyway, that apart, so there's basically data protection regulations are not really in place, so there is nothing really applicable as of now. And so currently all this is operating in a regulation vacuum. So they say this on paper, but this data protection regulation doesn't exist in reality as of today. And then the next thing they talk about is having standards, and again you can see that the standards are being referred to. Again, we see this India framework. So which is why I'm saying, when there is so much reference to this underlying India framework, one also will then need to look at the India framework, understand what it is, because a lot of stuff from there is going to be inherited, and there may not be much scope here to make changes there. But what standards basically refer to is that everyone is following the same formats. So for example, if one again looks at the PM Kisan database, for example, if the database, if one would want to understand it as an Excel sheet with columns, if a particular state, say the state of Punjab, is putting, this is just a very simple and crude example, but just to give an idea of what standards are, if the first column is serial number, second column is name of the farmer, and third column is land record. Say there are just these three columns, and Punjab has first as serial number, second is name, and third is land record. And some other states, say Tamil Nadu, does serial number first, land record second, name third. So then it will be difficult. So then the standard would say that across all states, whoever is making PM Kisan data, please, first column has to be serial number, second name, third land record. So this is just an example. So standards basically mean that everyone is following the same set of guidelines, same set of procedures. So that's the idea behind standards. And they also talk about there's some examples of standards we can look at later. It comes later, so it will again become further clearer. Now they're talking about privacy by design, which basically means that in all stages of development, completely during this entire design process, privacy will be kept in mind, and every program written, every software, and similarly we could also look at security by design. So basically they mean one has to be conscious of this all the time, privacy and security, and each and every program when it is written will have to keep this in mind. And so it's basically they're saying this, they want something to be cutting right through, which is good and something that ideally we would like. So here, so like we see, now they are talking about a national open digital ecosystem. So like they have put this consultation paper out. A consultation paper on the national open digital ecosystem was put out about a year back, in the month of May 2020, when the first wave of COVID was going on and the entire nation was locked down. That is when this paper was put out and feedback on this was taken. And actually this whole and there's also actually a couple of pages in this document which refers to an agricultural node. So this is basically a national open digital ecosystem is NODE node, and they talk about an agricultural node. So this agri node, we guess, is now AgriStack and this idea concept paper. And like I said, there are similar stuff is happening in the area of health, in the area of education. So this is something that is cutting across sectors, and digital governance push that is currently going on. And again we see reference to India, which is actually being developed by MIT, Ministry of Electronics and IT. So a lot of this is coming from there. So they say India 2.0 has proposed a set of agricultural patterns meant to be adopted by the ministries of the government of India, various state governments, and even lower local level governments, etc. So, and again this idea framework adopts the domain agriculture pattern proposed in India 2.0. So if a lot of this stuff is actually coming from elsewhere and then they put out this paper, how much scope is there to really change things fundamentally is something that keeps coming to me again and again. So again we saw this building blocks earlier. Now they are actually explaining it more. Building block is a reusable package of business or technological functionality. Basically it's a program, and like I said, this program, they view each of these to be independent, in the sense that each of these can be changed, upgraded, updated, and it wouldn't affect the rest of the system in any way. So then they are talking about some advantages to this whole thing, and then again technology agnostic, which basically means work on Android, work on Apple, that sort of thing. I mean, that would be one example, a simple example to try and understand it. It also means other things, but just to get a sense of what this term means. So then they have different kinds of building blocks, but one, I mean, just to get an idea, like I said, I would say just understand that this building block basically is a program or software, and they would want this to be each piece of program and software to work independently of everything else, independently but also together with everything else in an independent manner, so that each of them can be separately changed, upgraded, etc. So that's maybe just a simple way to understand it. Then they have core building blocks. So there are basically, there will be some core softwares, then there will be some common softwares, and then there are some reference softwares, and each of these there are examples later, so I won't go into them now. Basically to say that there are different kinds of softwares that they are envisioning, and some examples of this we will see later, which is why I won't go into it much right now. But again, just keep seeing how often this comes, India framework everywhere. So that's something that keeps making me wary, is if there is so much reference to to something else, then really how much change can we make here? So this is basically a diagram where they're trying to capture the entire system in one diagram. The BBs here are all building blocks, so that's what BB stands for. And all of this is explained later, so I won't linger much here, and we will look at each of these as and when they come later in the paper. So again we can see idea principles have been adopted in toto. So I mean, just the amount that this is coming is scaring me a bit. And then they are saying there are some foundational building blocks, which means there are some underlying fundamental foundational software programs that are running, and then the rest of it is built on top of those underlying programs. Now we come to the first one. Now they talk about a unique farmer ID, and they are saying that a unique number is going to be assigned to each farmer across the country. The reason that this is a random number is because otherwise the number will give away information. So for example, if one looks at vehicle registration, just the first few characters often will tell you, they stand for the RTO at which you have registered the vehicle. So it could be KA02 or TS03 or HP04, and then you would know KA means that vehicle is registered in Karnataka, TS means Telangana, HP means Himachal. So if you are following a certain system, then the number itself can give you information, but in order to ensure privacy, that if these numbers come out, then just merely from the number, not much information can be gathered. So that is why you would want it to be a random number. Now what they're saying is that, and the reason that they're having a unique farmer ID is because then all other information related to the farmer, land records, their bank account details, or what cropping patterns, etc. So if one wants soil health card information, so or insurance payments, credit history, if one wants different kinds of information of a particular farmer to all get integrated, linked to one another, then you would want them all to be linked to one particular reference point. So then that this XYZ, this suppose there is a certain unique farmer ID of XYZ, then you can say, okay, land record ABC is linked to farmer XYZ, account number so and so is linked to the farmer, crop insurance policy number so and so is linked, Kisan credit card number so and so is linked. So then just by getting this number, you get all the at least in all these other databases of land records, of PM Kisan, of credit history, insurance, etc. You can make a profile of the farmer by giving each farmer a unique ID number. So that's basically the thinking behind having such a thing. And as you can see, then it is they are saying that it will be associated with the Aadhaar number, mobile number, and then there will be demographic data, which means the address and age of the farmer, maybe land. So one doesn't know what exactly they will be here. That's not something that has been explained or defined, but something they see will be linked. And then so then again they're saying for authentication they will be using this. So like the Aadhaar is used in other places for the purpose of accessing any information or any service on this on this whole agriculture digital system. This unique farmer ID is what will be used. So if the farmer goes to apply for a loan, they will ask unique farmer ID. Wants to apply for crop insurance, unique farmer ID. Wants to get a soil health card, what is your unique farmer ID? So everywhere when they say authenticate, basically wherever you go to prove that that so and so farmer is indeed so and so farmer, they will use the unique farmer ID to do that. And they are saying regulations applicable to personal data shall apply to the UFID database, and so basically there is the draft data protection bill talks about certain kinds of data. It says what is personal data, what is not. So they're saying that this unique UFID is going to be classified as personal data and personally identifiable information. So as of now there are no regulations really applicable, but if and when they come into play, this is I think put in place for that scenario. So they are saying this does not capture or store any transaction data, which means this building block, which means the software that will generate unique farmer IDs, and whenever authentication is needed, it will do authentication of the farmer through unique farmer ID, but this specific software will limit itself to just that much. This piece of software, that doesn't mean that the rest of the system will not do it. It just means that this particular piece of software will not capture or store any transaction data. Now how much so hopefully I don't know if that will also mean authentication information, that which would mean if a farmer has gone to a bank and authenticated himself through the unique farmer ID, this software may say when the bank asks is so and so farmer indeed so and so farmer, that software may say yes or no, but the software may not store the information that a bank had asked for this information, or that if the farmer then goes to get soil health card, it may not store the information that soil health card service had requested for authentication for so and so farmer. So that would be the kind of transaction data that they're talking about, which this is saying it will not capture or store. But that is only this piece of software. It may still capturing and storing of such information could happen I don't know, one doesn't know, may happen in the rest of the system. And then there are some core registries which are basically databases. So again we will look at some of this later, but for example the PM Kisan database could be one core registry, just to give an example, so that all the soil health card data is in one database. That could be a core registry. All the insurance policies could be a core registry, or all information about the credit farmers have taken formal credit from the banking system. So these are just some possible ideas of what a core registry could mean. And then core directories are lists of entities or authorities, services that are maintained. So directories are basically lists of various kinds of things that are easily available. So lists of schemes a farmer could access, that would be a directory, or lists of KVKs across the country could be a directory. So those kinds of things. Then they have something called master codes, which again I think they come to in a bit later. But basically these are, one could sort of understand this also to be like a certain standard. Basically things that ensure that everyone is following the same system, and that if everyone works in their own separate system, then these systems can't talk to each other very conveniently. So master codes are something that will enable that to ensure uniformity and interoperability. So now they are looking at some examples of core registries and core directories and master codes. So now there is something called a unified farmer service interface, which they are saying is the most important core building block. So which means this is the most important software in this whole system in a way. So like we all are probably aware of UPI payments, and when we pay through Google Pay, Amazon Pay, Paytm, etc., a lot of it is based on UPI. So similarly, there will be a fundamental underlying system on which this whole digitization in agriculture is going to work, and that core system is this Unified Farmer Service Interface, UFSI. And so there will be some APIs, basically various programs that will provide for identification, for authentication, authorization, so basically different APIs that will give access to different services, different kinds of information. So they are saying now that given that a majority of the digital services transactions in the agriculture space happen within the state jurisdictions, monolithic architecture of UFSI would pose problems of management and scalability. So therefore they want a federated architecture. So which means there is, each state could have its own version running. Of course, they will all be versions compatible with each other, but they are allowing space for that kind of flexibility. There will also be a central version running, and there will be state versions running. So they are saying Government of India can establish the first instance, which means the first version in a sense will be established by the central government, and then so it will handle services and transactions involving the central government and its agencies, pan India or cross border, international data transfer, etc. So one could imagine that, for example, PM Kisan, which is being run by the center, is something that would run out of the central government UFSI, just for example. And then if there are state government schemes, then the state governments will run their programs on their state UFSIs. Then states, they are saying, will have the option of joining the national UFSI to meet their data exchange requirements, or establish their own farmer service interface and federate the same with the central database. So basically they are saying that states can make their own version, but it has to integrate with the central version. So either the state can directly use the central version, or if they prefer, they can make the state version, but there's no complete independence. It will have to be in a manner that integrates with the central version. And then now they are saying even private agencies may register and operate on this. On this UFSI now is the central one, and FSI are the state ones. So for example, if there is a agri mechanization service that wants to then be built on this whole thing, like Uber and Ola were built on Google Maps, if they want to do something like that, then they are saying any private service or agency may also get access to this and get built on this. And they are saying there is an active collaboration with NPCI, which would lead to faster implementation of payments. So basically National Payments Corporation, so for example, if PM Kisan payments have to be done, then since payments are involved, so there will be active collaboration to ensure that this whole farmer database can talk to the whole payments database very easily, so that they can facilitate all these payments. So now they are saying they will provide a high level view. So this is what they see this whole unified farmer service interface as being as. So again, like I said, APIs are software, pieces of software that allow access, that allow systems to talk to each other. So there will be data providers. So this various data providers, so which means various public entities, government entities, private players, even individuals, through various APIs, through various methods, basically will have access to this. And similarly, data consumers, so various service providers, innovators, researchers, etc., can access this. And then let's see, they're just saying something here in a bit of a small font. So here they're saying multiple farmer service interfaces can exist. There will be one at a national level, one each at state levels, and they are all federated. So they will all, they all can interact with each other. And then there is consented exchange of data. Now consented exchange, one has to see what exactly they mean by this. How much this consent is, whether this consent can be revoked. If this government is collecting data as of now, they seem to be presuming consent. So let's see how much that works out. So now they are saying there's going to be something called the Idea Architecture Repository, which basically means that there will be some there's a place where anyone who wants to build on this, who wants to interact with this, there is a place that the person can go to and learn how to do so. So if there is an API to, if there is a program that gives access to PM Kisan, in what format is that information being provided? So one has to learn all those things in order to make one's own program to then use that information. So those kind of things will all be available easily, is basically what they're trying to say. So for example, if one has to understand it through an analogy, Apple has an app store, Android has the Google Play Store. So they are sort of architecture repositories, one could understand very, very vaguely as an architecture repository. So then apps like, say, WhatsApp and Facebook and various other apps, Google Maps, Gmail app, all this is then built on that. So in that sense, it will allow such apps to all be built, is basically sort of what they're trying to say here. And they are saying that something like this has been done in South Korea, and so that has been given as an example here. Now they are saying that there's going to be some common building blocks, common softwares, which anyone can just use for themselves. So now we look at so this is where these common building blocks are. I'll just zoom in a bit again. So you can say they are building some common building blocks for supply chain, storage management, something called smart farming as a service, e-markets, insurance, credit. So this is something that they are envisioning will be common building blocks. Then there will be a service portal, which means that anyone who is seeking to provide a service is then will all then be listed there, and access will be provided there. So and then they are saying that again, there are already standards that have been made by MITI for this, and that will have to be followed. So so basically, in a sense, the architecture portal is for those who want to make programs, who want to build programs. That is for them, for all the software developers. This one would imagine is for the actual consumer. So a farmer will go to the service portal, and then they will see, register for PM Kisan, apply for a loan, apply for insurance, try and get soil health card. So these are all various services where one would imagine will be listed on this service portal. Now they're talking about an app store. So so if there is someone, for example, some firm has made a mechanization for hire app, then if any farmer wants to download that app, so then there is an app store where the farmer can go and download it. They're saying there will be a call center, and any existing call centers will also be integrated with this database. There will be SMS messaging systems, so that in case any farmers, any OTPs or any information needs to be done, that can all be easily integrated. They're saying weather data will be available, and then lab to field, which means basically that also all the various agriculture university research stations, KVKs, etc. will all get integrated, so that any new research, etc. that is being generated can easily get farmers easily get access to everything immediately. Real-time prices would mean that what are the current prices at various markets is something they are saying will be available easily. DBT is things like PM Kisan, so various DBT schemes will all get integrated here. GOI schemes, so whatever schemes are being run by Government of India, like say for example Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, etc. will all again get integrated here. And then they are saying regulations and ease of doing business. So the building block addresses, so building block basically means, so there is a particular software which will address the need for reducing paperwork related to obtaining licenses, and to enhance ease of doing business. So anyone who wants to start a new business can go to this particular software, and it will easily enable people to start doing business. So they are saying this is what they're envisioning for the center, and then they are saying states can build their own versions of this. And then there are reference blocks. So in this whole image, reference blocks are here. So here they're saying reference blocks of analytics and ENAM, various GIS. GIS is Geo Information System, which basically means satellite imagery, etc. And then there is this sandbox we were talking about, where anyone who wants to try something new without breaking the rest of the system can do their testing, tinkering, trials and all here. And the Agri Data Exchange. So these are things that are coming under this reference building blocks. So then they talk about analytics. So monitoring trends of these are some of the analytics that they are currently envisioning. It doesn't in any way mean that it will get restricted to this. In the future this could expand and be more. Currently they're talking about crop sowing, crop condition, results of crop cutting experiments, physical financial progress and implementation of GUI programs. So PM Kisan payments, insurance payments and all those things. So one could analyze all that. data. And then there are also commodity prices, weather prediction. So if weather data is available, then anyone can then use that weather data and come up with their predictions. Then they are saying ENAM, which already exists, is going to get integrated into all this, and GIS tools, which again, like I said, is all to do with satellite imagery. So they are saying that there will be tools to integrate all that also. So how that will get done remains to be seen, but that's something that they are providing for. The sandbox I've already explained earlier, so I won't go much into detail of this. I mean, it's for those who are more technically inclined, they would anyway understand all this, so I don't think a layperson needs to fully understand this, so let's just skip this. And then they're talking about the Agri Data Exchange. This they are saying is going to be a key enabler of the data economy, so this is something we really need to keep an eye on. So they are saying several studies in the Doubling Farmer Income report show that the apparent and latent value of data is not exploited. So they are saying there's lack of qualitative data, incomplete data sets, lack of organization of all these data, and then they are not all interoperable. That is, they are all operating with different standards, so they can't easily talk to each other. So these are the issues that all this is seeking to address. So anyway, there's more of all this later, but this is something one has to keep an eye out for. And then there are some common building blocks and reference building blocks. Now this again, we can see again is coming from the India framework. And these are really at the core, as you can see, they're at the core of this, and this is coming from elsewhere. So how much of this is really up for fundamental change is a question. So these are the kind of things that they will be inheriting from what is being developed by MIT. Now look, these are the examples. So there will be something called eOffice, which basically is, I suppose, to digitize and make paperless the agriculture ministry. And this knowledge management system is something that will come bundled with eOffice. It will have policy office memos, policy documents, domain specific knowledge, and then learning management systems for various training. There's going to be a search engine, again payment gateway to integrate payments, service plus, so anything over and above this, anyone wants to build their own services, there will be space for that. Language tools, so for translating from from English to various Indian languages. Consent manager, which will manage consent of data sharing. This is something one will have to really look at critically from a privacy point of view. As you can see, all this is coming through another stack, which is the DigiLocker. So DigiLocker is where it is being envisioned all one's documents are going to be stored. So if you have land records, those land records will be stored in DigiLocker. If you have signed up for a crop insurance, your insurance policy will be stored in DigiLocker. So all once this is going to be an online repository of everyone's documents. And then there's going to be an email system that they are building along with this. So that is that core part here we were looking at, reference building blocks, common building blocks. And then there are state cores. State cores are here. So there's a state core exchange, then the registries, directories, architecture. So basically this whole big system we are seeing here is going to get replicate this entire big system is going to get replicated at each state, and that is what this is trying to reflect. Then there are some national agriculture applications adopted by states. So as it says here, over the last 2 decades, several applications related to agriculture sector have been developed by ministry. It is desirable that states examine these applications and adopt them. So they are saying that various apps are going to get developed or have been developed by the center, and they would like states to use this rather than coming up with their own versions. So this is provided in Annexure 5. And then there are some common applications for states that are being envisioned. So since this is really it is something that one will have to look at the state level also, but this also primarily is to do with state governments, and they are the ones who have to look at this. But having said that, since all implementation is done through state governments, even otherwise citizens also need to know what is going on here. So they are saying that special emphasis may be laid on feasibility of achieving within a reasonable effort of 3 months. They want interoperability with other correlated applications of the state, and compliance and security. So basically they are in around 3 months they want states to start doing all this, and 3 months I guess is suggested, so this is all at the state level. And then they have some value added services, innovative services, which figures here. So this is the weather data. Lab to field is again integration with various agriculture universities, real-time prices, direct benefit transfer, Government of India schemes, regulations, ease of doing business. So this is where they see this fitting. And here, like I said earlier, data is the new oil. So this is how they are seeing how data can be used to make money. And so this is why this sandbox they were talking about earlier, where people can create, any private individual can create applications, tinker around and see how it works, and then data exchange to get access to data to then so that those programs have access to information to work. Again we see all that here. So these are some examples of what all they see happening. Helping with crop planning through artificial intelligence, machine learning, statistical models, big data. So macro crop planning would then maybe at a state level or at a very macro level, and then at micro level, so this would be at a farmer level, again using similar methods, also using satellite imagery, advising farmers on crop planning. And then farming as a smart farming as a service. So here they see some aggregation platforms. Aggregation platforms are basically like Uber and Ola. Again machine learning, Internet of Things, so sensors in farms transmitting data. Drones, they see the use of drones, again satellite imagery, and POS devices to enable payments and all that. And so here they see rapid soil testing going on, e-soil health cards on mobile, integrated nutrition management through sensors and all that. Then farm machinery for hire like Uber, so local weather advisories. So rather than just weather advisory for your district or your block specific to your farm, you can get weather advisories. Pest prediction and management services, credit services, insurance services. Then they are seeing supply chain as something that can be digitized. using blockchain, which is the distributed ledger technology we saw earlier. Then markets, integration of markets, again through various means. Quality testing at various places also integrated into all this. Traceability for exports, traceability for organic produce or any high value produce. So all that they see happening here, and again, data exchange to enable all this to happen. And so basically they see all this happening through various infrastructure and technology services. So basically they want a lot of innovation, and they want to allow private players to come into the space to start doing all this. The next thing that the paper talks about are standards. Standards are important everywhere, but also in digital systems. Just to give you an example, from using Airtel, you can call someone who's using Vodafone or BSNL or Jio, because they all have a same, they're following certain similar standards, and so they can all talk to each other. Similarly, you can send an email from Gmail to Hotmail to Yahoo, because there are some common standards that all these email services adhere to. But an example where there are no standards. So one reason, there are other reasons also, but one reason you can't say send from your Apple messaging system, you can't send a message to WhatsApp, or from WhatsApp to Signal, or Signal to any other messaging app, because apart from other reasons, also because they have varying standards, and so for that reason they can't talk to each other. So if you want to have systems that can talk to each other, then having common standards is important. Similarly, even if one takes examples in agriculture, when it comes to land, some systems use hectares, some systems use acres. Locally, many places they use bighas, and one bigha in one place is not necessarily equal to one bigha in another place. So this is an example of a system where there are no standards. Even for weighment systems, they could be quintals, they could be tons. In some places they use mana. So these are all various standards, and ideally you want to have uniform standards rather than varying standards. So they're envisioning two kinds of standards. One is for the IT systems, and within the IT system also some standards for data and some standards for technology. Again we see India 1.0 standards, so India is everywhere here. And then there are domain standards, which would in our case mean the agricultural domain. So what are the standards for classification for various quantities and commodities, materials, etc. There are some examples also following. So I won't go into a lot of this text, but just in terms of examples of the kind of standards that they want to follow, they're looking at FAO standards as well as other standards. Classification of various kinds of inputs, machinery, equipment, practices. So these are all things that need to be standardized. So like you're saying, one sees this India 1.0, 2.0 coming repeatedly, and there are also standards for services, standards for data, and so they have a phased approach for developing these standards. So then there are some details about all these standards, and someone who's more interested can go through it in more detail. And up to now this was all about various technical things, and this chapter looks at mainly how this is going to get taken forward and how this can get implemented. And since they're talking about a federated structure, There's also responsibilities for the central government, various state governments, also the private sector, and they plan to, like most things these days, it's going to be implemented in a mission mode, and there is going to be a national mission on digital agriculture, and this is going to be it will have an advisory council which will be multi-stakeholder. So as we'll just see later in a short while, in the annexures, there have been in all the various things. This has been in development for about a year now, if not longer. And till now, there hasn't been a single farmer representative on any of their various committees, task force, or groups. So hopefully, this multi-stakeholder advisory council will have some farmer representatives. And similarly, there will be, whatever committees and all are formed at the state level, whatever implementation infrastructures, sorry, at the central level, whatever implementation infrastructures there at the central level, they are envisioning that it will also be replicated at the state level, and there will also be a PPP framework to involve the private sector. And this is a bit interesting because there's the talk of cooperative federalism, and but if any state wants to opt out, or if any state is going slow on the implementation of this, they are saying that they can hold back funds that the central government gives to state governments for various schemes, like maybe Pradhan Mantri Krishi Vikas Yojana, Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana, PM Kisan, Fasal Bima Yojana. These all various things run by the center. So all these funds may get affected if states don't implement this. So they are thinking about a 3-year time period in which to get done all these steps that they have elaborated below. So one could go through this a little more in detail. And that's where the main portion of this document ends. Then they have listed some issues, specific questions that they have asked. Asha is planning to prepare a response, and that will also be shared in the public domain. And those of you interested can also be a part of this process, and if not, you could also send your own responses as well. So that's here. And then the first annexure, we see the office memorandum on constitution of a task force, and the absolute first sentence there says centralized farmers database based on revenue land records. So initially they were talking about animal husbandry and fisher folk, and if all these people don't have land in their name, then really they're only reducing it to, at least for now, those farmers who are doing field crop cultivation. And even there, it will be only those people in the family of the farming family in whose name the actual land records are. So if the other members in the family and their names are not on land records, then they may not get captured in this database. And then you'll see various people who are in the task force. You won't find any farmer representative in any of these groups. Also, just something to keep in mind, that all these developments have been this whole stage of digitization has started with Aadhaar, and you will see people who have been associated with the Aadhaar project, like this ex-chairperson of UIDAI and all that, who are a part of all these various other committees that are taking this forward. Initially, a lot of this development was happening within the government, and thankfully this current concept paper etc. is currently at least taking place within the government. That's a good thing. But a lot of the team that was building Aadhaar initially within the government, then they found that too constricting, and they started working outside the government, and they formed a non-government organization, private body, and then they developed, lot of these products are developed outside, and then they evangelize it to the government. So a lot of this development takes place in the private sector, and then it is handed over to the government for them to use, uh, which is a bit problematic, because all these development is then not as accountable as it would be if it is taking place within the government than outside. So thankfully so far this seems to be taking place within the government. So those who are interested can go through all these names, and after this various working groups have been formed to look at various aspects of all this. And just one name also to just watch out for here is Mr. Bharat Pandey, who's an investment partner at the Omidyar network. So Omidyar is also has been for quite some time now a part of this ecosystem around Aadhaar and all these various stacks being developed. So in that sense they have a stake or a vested interest in seeing that all this is successful. So this is a name you'll see also popping up across sectors again and again. So this is another group that has been formed, and you can go through the names. For those of you who are interested can go through in more detail names of all these people. So again we see here Mr. Bharat Pandey as a special invitee from the Omidyar network. Then the next annexure looks at, it's just an illustrative list, so it's not necessary it will get restricted to this. Various kinds of master data, directories, registries. So that's what this talks about. The next annexure, because exchange of data is really at the heart of this exercise. So there's an entire annexure just on data exchanges, because that's how critical this is to this whole process. And like it says out here, ease of discovery of data is critically required for business operations, and being able to provide value-added, integrated and end-to-end services to the consumers using combinatorial power of different data sets from multiple sources. So this is why they have the unique farmer ID, so that it can be linked across databases, and thereby all these databases can be combined, and then all this data can be analyzed using machine learning, artificial intelligence, etc. To then provide various services. So this is just what this data exchange seeks to do, and this is the kind of architecture that the governance system that they have in mind. So the various things that the data exchange will do is user management, so who all have access to data, who are the users to this. Then obviously cataloging data, and that will be a core function of this. And this is the gateway. So a software that gives access to the data this is the core part is managing the database, and this then would be then giving access to the data. And then there is transaction management. So various they envision that access to this data will also be monetized. So this will handle that part. And then managing the consent framework, so whether consent has been given to share this data or not. So there is a layer which looks at all that. And then of course managing this entire infrastructure. So that is what they are envisioning here. And of course they are seeing an equal role for business apart from governments in this whole thing. And then there's just one other thing. Oh yeah, it's just here. So they are saying that an appropriate business model may be devised to ensure that the data exchange is financially sustainable. So they're saying that some sponsor can build this whole thing, but then the operational costs are to be recovered through service charges to be collected from the participants of the data exchange. So there will be some sort of transaction fee for all this data that will be accessed through this exchange. So that's about data exchanges. Then this is a list of the various applications in the agriculture space that have been developed. This is that image that we looked at, various parts of this image we were looking at earlier. And these are some additional references that people can read. Certainly this is a link to the India framework, so this is also something that anyone who wants to really understand this concept paper will also have to look at this India framework as well. So I hope this was useful.